In this episode, we look at more forgotten fortresses, headquarters, and battle stations of action figures from the 1980s. So, stick around! Hello, fellow dorks and dorkettes, and welcome to Nostalgia Syndrome. My name's Rob, and in this episode, we will be doing the fourth installment of Forgotten 80s Action Figure Playsets. Before we get started, I just want to say, as I usually do, that not all of these are forgotten. They are probably cherished by a lot of people out there that grew up with them in the 80s, but to the vast majority, a lot of these, they had no idea existed. To be honest, I didn't even know some of these existed, and they're from toy lines that I absolutely adored while growing up. But I never knew that they had vehicles, playsets, anything other than the figures themselves. So this has been a great learning experience for me to see the broader picture of a lot of these toy lines. And speaking of toy lines in the 80s, they took a lot more chances back then than they do now. And I know this is something that I've discussed many, many times before, but yeah, without having any evidence of how popular a toy line would be, they just threw everything out there, usually in the first wave. Like I said, along with the figures, there were a lot of vehicles and play sets and accessories that they just threw all out there at once. And nowadays, something has to be proven moneymaker for them to even take a chance on even doing a second wave of figures, let alone all of those awesome things. So a lot of these playsets, as we've looked at in previous lists and this list and future lists, are from, unfortunately, flash-in-the-pan toy lines that hit the shelves and you blinked and they were gone. They just didn't have the staying power, they didn't have cartoons attached to them, they just unfortunately fizzled, and it's a real shame. So anyway, let's get on to the list. Number 1 is probably the most metal of all playset names, and I mean that figuratively and literally. That is the Fortress of Steel from Robo. With its white rocky exterior, the Fortress of Steel really reminds me of like the Hoth battle set from Kenner in the Star Wars line. This awesome fortress doubled as a carrying case, as it would fold in on itself and actually had a handle. But that is the least of the awesome features that it had. It had a workable crane that would help lift the robots into their battle stations. And if you remember the Robo figures, none of them had legs. They had suction cup bases. And yeah, I loved the few Robo figures that I actually had. And this playset actually kind of plays into that because there are no steps or anything. They need a crane to get around. And actually on the back of the box, it actually states this. If you allow me, I will read that excerpt on the back of the box. And it says that Blazer, who is part of RoboForce, helps his warrior buddies into their defensive positions with the working robot boom crane and hoist. So that's kind of a neat little thing. I mean, they knew their figures didn't have legs, and they kind of played into that with having this crane. But that's not all. Like with a lot of playsets and fortresses at the time, it had a little jail. It had a drawbridge. It had a weapons room with tons of accessories and weapons that you could use with your RoboForce figures. It had a flipping top that, on one, it's a flat base, but if you flip it over, it had a laser turret. It had a blockade doors that would close. I mean, it's just a really neat playset, and one that I didn't even know existed. I loved the RoboForce figures, but little did I know that they had something this huge and immense in their arsenal. I had no idea growing up. It was only until recently that I learned that this thing even existed. And it goes for a pretty penny online. I mean, I think because just of the rarity of it. I wouldn't think a lot of people are clamoring for it because RoboForce isn't that popular of a line, but just with how rare it is, yeah, it gets a lot of money. Now, we go from one of the most metal of names of any playset to one that's more comedic, and that is the Precinct Police Station from the Police Academy toy line. Released in 1989 by Kenner, the Police Academy toys, yeah, they tend to be a hot button topic every once in a while because people freak out over the fact that there was a toy line based on an R-rated movie. Now, I covered this topic a few months ago, so if you want to look for the episode, please do, because I found it quite interesting the more I dug into things like this. Because Police Academy, at the time of the toy's release, became a PG, if not PG-13, film franchise. It really dropped the R rating and went full force into family territory. But anyway, yeah, like I said, this is the more comedic side of playsets because, yeah, this came with, of course, a jail cell, like most playsets, as I said. It came with a breakaway floor for criminals to fall into the jail cell. There's a weather vane on the top that's bullet riddled with a target. But all in all, this is just a nice two-story, like, building type of facade that you could use for any toy line, really. Again, this is one that is deemed rare on the secondary market and goes for a lot of money. A lot more than even what the Fortress of Steel goes for, which I find fascinating. Because, I mean, it was released in '89. At least Fortress of Steel came out in the early '80s, so I could see that being a little bit older and commanding a little bit more money. But something more recent and based on a toy line that I don't see anyone really clamoring for, I just find that mind-boggling. Now, at the time that it was released in '89, I kind of was aged out of buying new toys, especially ones of a comedic nature like the Police Academy toys. So I don't really remember this on the store shelves, and I don't remember seeing any advertisements for it. And like I said, this is just a really solid building. So if you're doing any like world building in, your collection, this might fit if not for the price. I mean, it's just a brick building with 2 stories on the inside that you could pretty much turn into whatever you wanted. I mean, it could be a police station, it could be a hangout for a gang like the Dreadnoks or something, or it could just be a home. I mean, so that's a really neat appeal of a piece like this. So anyway, on to number 3. Now, the Fortress of Steel may have the most metal of names, but this toy has the most metal of package art. And this is the Ice Castle from the Blackstar toy line. With package art that rivals some of the best Masters of the Universe artwork, this Blackstar toy looks awesome. With how this castle was molded and the paint applications on it, it actually looks like it is a frosty location. And one of the best things on it, and with most things from the '80s, it had glow-in-the-dark applications. There are actually 3 little things on the front. 2 gargoyle type of things and a figurehead above the door that actually glow in the dark. How awesome is that? Pair that with a real firing cannon with a suction cupped dart that you could shoot. I mean, this is an awesome playset. The only downside to the Ice Castle is the same problems I have with Castle Grayskull. Albeit, these are awesome, awesome castles and playsets, but they kind of skirt around a lot of things by including cardboard cutouts and stickers instead of actually providing real accessories. So the computer that is inside this ice castle is just pretty much a sticker, albeit a very cool looking one. Even Overlord's right-hand man is a sticker that is in one of the towers. I mean, they never even made a figure of that character. All he got was a sticker. So, yeah, that's pretty sad for that dude. But all in all, this is a great castle and would make a great addition to any fantasy toy line. Number 4 comes from one of my favorite cartoons from the 80s that I wish I would have gotten a lot more of than I actually did. And that is the Bionx 6. This is the secret headquarters high-tech laboratory. This playset has a lot going for it, and it was actually made to be modular, so you could move the stuff around and fit any type of play style that you wanted. It had an elevator. Hey, first one on the list with an elevator, so that's kind of shocking. It has big cannons and ionizing beams and guns and rotating little modules, and yeah, there's a lot going on with this thing. It takes up a lot of real estate out because it doesn't have a second floor per se. I mean, the roof acts as a second floor, but it's not like some of the things on the list that actually is a self-contained unit with a second floor. Now, like I said, I love the Bionx 6, and I wish I would have gotten some of the toys. They, if I remember correctly, they were made by LJN, and they had a lot of die-cast pieces on them, which really plays into the bionic nature of the characters. One of the neat things, like I said, it's modular and kind of laid out, is that it has different things. Like I said, it has the laboratory section, it has cannons and things, but it actually has like a little street scene, if you will, that looks like marble steps and columns and statues and a brick wall that the characters can smash through. I mean, this, like I said, has a lot going on for it, and it's really neat. And one of the things I love seeing with things like this is how it could factor into other toy lines. I mean, it could work for G.I. Joe, possibly He-Man. I mean, your imagination is the only thing holding you back from what this place could have been. I mean, you could have added this to one of the fortresses or castles on the list so far and had an even bigger area to romp around in and had so much fun. I mean, that's the things I look at when I look at these things. It's just how much fun I could have had as a kid, and just my imagination runs wild. Now, number 5 might not be truly forgotten, but it's something that I didn't know existed, and I'm sure that there are plenty of fans out there that knew this thing existed and probably loved it. And that is the Crystal Castle for She-Ra. This thing actually looks fantastic with its cloud-like base and its great golden paint applications. This truly looks like a crystal castle. Now, I have to be honest with you, I don't know that much about She-Ra. There are a lot of the figures I wish I would have had as a kid, and I actually talked about that in a previous episode as well. But this is the exact polar opposite of Castle Grayskull, wherein Castle Grayskull came with a lot of cardboard cutouts of what could have been, even though it had an awesome throne. This actually came with furniture. Now, mind you, this was sold to girls mostly, so it wanted to capitalize on the dollhouse type of theme for them. So it came with a fireplace, a dresser, a bed, and different little knickknacks like that. So I think that's actually pretty cool. I mean, I could see He-Man and his homies hanging out here with She-Ra and her friends, no problem. Now, like I said, this is probably not a forgotten playset to a lot of people out there, but it's one that I actually forgot totally about. I do remember it coming out. I remember seeing it on the shelves, but it totally slipped my mind until I was doing research for this. Now, it would have been cool if we got like a weapons rack and things like that for She-Ra and her cohorts. But unfortunately, no. They get kind of the dollhouse treatment, like I said. I mean, there should have been more swords and battle axes and stuff included, just because that's the universe that they lived in. I mean, it would have fit perfectly, and there should have been an addition to it. But for what it is, it's really neat. I mean, kind of like way back when I discussed the Filmation Ghostbusters headquarters. The one thing I really liked about that was it included housewares. I mean, you got dressers and beds and tables and chairs and even a telephone. And that, I think, is just a really cool appeal of a playset like this. I mean, it didn't need to be a Ghostbusters headquarters. It could have been anything that you wanted it to be. And I feel the same way with this. When you include those dollhouse type of features, you know, you're opening up a whole new world of play and imagination with it. And like I said, this unfortunately was just marketed just to the girls and had that whole dollhouse aesthetic to it. But I could see a lot of toys chilling out here. I mean, it's just a neat looking thing. I mean, it's pink, but so what? I mean, that's just a color. It doesn't dictate anything. But anyway, that was just a quick list of 5 forgotten playsets from the 1980s. And yeah, they kind of go all over the place. And that's one of the cool things about 80s toys was they are all over the place. Now, I have a few more installments of this for the future, and I can't wait to jump on those as well. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. If you got something to say, please leave a comment. I love reading them, and I love getting back to everybody. And if you're new around here and you enjoyed this or any of the episodes down here, please hit subscribe. And if you hit that little bell icon, you'll be notified whenever there's a new episode. So until next time, thanks for watching. Keep being rad and stay dorky.